The snow in Silver Creek, Montana, has a sound. It's not silence, not really. It's a deep, muffling hush that presses in from
Get
all
back! Get
sides,
back!
swallowing echoes and bearing the world's sharp edges under a soft, white weight. I've come to know that sound well, but it's nothing like the other silence I carry. The one that still screams in my ears years after the last gunshot faded in a Phoenix alleyway. That silence is a void. This one is just full. A low whine, more a sigh than a complaint, brought my focus back to the cruiser. Beside me, Kodiak shifted in the passenger seat, his breath fogging the glass. His amber eyes, impossibly old for a 3-year-old German shepherd, were fixed on the unending curtain of white beyond the windshield. He knew my moods better than any person, probably better than I did myself. He'd earned that right. The slight, almost imperceptible limp in his left shoulder was a constant reminder of the price of his loyalty, a mirror to the scars I carried on the inside. We were a matched set of damaged goods, my canine partner and I. "Easy, boy," I murmured, my voice a rough rasp in the cold cab. I reached over and rubbed the thick fur behind his ears, my thumb tracing the faint, healed-over line of a long-ago wound. He leaned into my touch, a silent reassurance passing between us. It was our morning ritual, this pre-dawn patrol into nothingness. The hiss of the heater, the rhythmic thump of the wipers, and the shared understanding that we were the only two souls awake for miles. He didn't try to fill the silence Michael had left behind. He just shared it, and for that, I was grateful. The radio crackled to life, pulling me from my thoughts. "Unit 3, what's your 20, Evan?" The voice belonged to Sarah at dispatch, warm and steady against the static. "Still on the northern route, Sarah. Just passing mile marker 18. Anything new?" A pause. I knew what was coming. "Afraid so. Got a call from dispatch over in Red Lodge. Another rig from Midland Freight never made its check-in. Left their depot at 0400. Should have been in town an hour ago." My hand tightened on the steering wheel. That made 4. 4 rigs in 2 weeks, vanished without a trace on this same stretch of unforgiving mountain road. The official report would blame the storm, just like the others. A slide-off, a whiteout, a driver misjudging a curve, plausible deniability, courtesy of Mother Nature. But 4? That wasn't bad luck. That was a pattern. The kind of pattern that made the hairs on your neck stand up. The kind that made old-timers like Silas Croft at the gas station stop talking and just stare into their coffee when you asked about it. "Any signal from its GPS?" I asked, already knowing the answer. "Negative. Just went dead. Like the others. Like they'd been erased." I looked out at the road ahead, where our tracks were the only blemish on a perfect, pristine landscape. The snow kept falling, relentless and beautiful, covering everything, hiding everything. It was a perfect place for things to disappear. Beside me, Kodiak didn't relax. He pushed his nose against the window, his posture alert, his gaze fixed on the endless woods that lined the road. He felt it too. Something was wrong in the quiet white world of Silver Creek, and it was our job to find it. Something was wrong in the quiet white world of Silver Creek, and it was our job to find it. Sometimes finding things just means driving slow enough for them to reveal themselves. We pushed on, the cruiser crawling along the pass as the morning light struggled to pierce the heavy gray sky. 10 miles past our last stop, Kodiak let out a low, guttural sound he reserved for things that were fundamentally wrong. It wasn't a bark of aggression, but a deep hum of warning. I followed his gaze to the right, where the line of orange snow poles disappeared. There, carved into a deep drift, were the unmistakable tracks of a heavy rig. They didn't follow the road. They veered sharply off it, plowing a deep furrow through the snow toward the gorge. I killed the engine, and the sudden silence was absolute. We got out, the crunch of our boots the only sound. The tracks were deep, the edges still sharp, recent. I followed them on foot, my hand resting on the Glock holstered to my chest. Kodiak stayed close, his body low and tense. The trail ended abruptly at the edge of a steep, wooded ravine. There was no truck, no wreckage, just a few snapped pine branches and a single glinting object half buried in the snow. I knelt and pulled it free. It was a shard of dark blue metal from a Peterbilt's front bumper, freshly snapped. This wasn't a slide-off. This was an ambush. Back in the cruiser, I found the truck's log on the county dispatch frequency, a Peterbilt 579 Midland Freight. The report placed it just a few miles from our location, wedged against the shoulder. We found it 10 minutes later, a great blue beast listing in the snow like a beached whale. It was just as the report said, no driver, no lights, just the wind howling a mournful tune around its chassis. The driver's side door was ajar. As I pulled it open, the smell hit me. The coppery tang of blood mixed with stale coffee and motor oil. A dark smear stained the driver's seat. On the floor, a single torn work glove lay near the brake pedal. It was a ghost ship stripped of its soul. I searched the cab, Kodiak sniffing anxiously at my heels. Under a cracked clipboard, I found a folded logistics map. It was hand-marked in red ink, with 5 circles drawn around isolated industrial sites across the county. Near the top, a small, shaky X was marked over a location labeled Osprey Point, an abandoned hydroelectric plant shut down since an avalanche in the 90s. Why would a freight driver have a map to a dead power station? I needed local knowledge, from someone who saw more than they spoke. I drove back down into Silver Creek, the map burning a hole in my pocket. The only place showing signs of life was the ice brake gas in general. Inside, the air smelled of kerosene and old coffee. Behind the counter sat Silas Croft, a man who looked as weathered as the mountains themselves. His hands, gnarled and calloused, were never still. "Afternoon, officer," he said, not looking up from the part he was cleaning. "Silas. Found a Midland truck up on Granite Pass. Driver's gone. Blood in the cab." His hand stopped moving. Slowly he looked up, and his faded blue eyes sharpened with an intelligence that belied his simple surroundings. "Fourth one this month," he said, his voice like gravel. "They vanish. It's like the snow just eats them, but it ain't the snow." "Then what is it?" He leaned forward, his voice dropping. "SUVs black, no plates. Too clean, too quiet for this part of the country. They show up before the big storms, leave right after. Folks see 'em. They just know better than to talk. Talking gets you on a list." I unfolded the map and slid it across the counter. "Ever seen this place?" Osprey Point. Silas put on a pair of thick spectacles and squinted. "Osprey Point? That place has been dead 30 years. A concrete ghost." He looked back up at me, his gaze heavy. "You go poking around a place that's supposed to be dead, officer. You better be sure it ain't just pretending." His warning followed me all the way up the winding, unplowed road to the old power station. It sat hunched against the ridge like a rusted metal skeleton. I parked the cruiser out of sight and approached on foot, Kodiak moving like a shadow ahead of me. The air was heavy with the smell of decay and damp concrete. Through a broken bay door, we slipped inside. It was a cavern of rust and shadows, but at the far end of a corridor, a light flickered. Artificial. A low hum vibrated through the soles of my boots. They had power. Then footsteps. 2 men in dark tactical gear, carrying rifles, walked down the corridor. Their movements were professional, their faces hard. Mercenaries. I melted back behind a massive rusted transformer, holding my breath, my hands signaling Kodiak to stay. As they passed, I crept in the opposite direction. It was Kodiak who found the door, his nose pressed against a metal panel that was almost invisible behind a fallen support beam. He pawed at it gently. It was newer than the rest of the building, reinforced. I pried it open with a crowbar from my pack. A narrow stairwell descended into a fluorescent-lit passage. At the end was a cinder-block room, a cell. Curled in the corner was a man, gaunt and bruised, his eyes wide with terror. He flinched as I entered. "Please," he rasped. I didn't say anything. "I'm not one of them," I said softly. "Officer Evan Hayes. I'm here to get you out." His name was Markham Jennings. He'd been driving for Midland Freight. They'd blocked the road, claiming to be Border Patrol, and had taken him. "They wanted me to sign a contract," he coughed, wincing from a cracked rib. "Drive for them. No questions, no GPS. I refused." He told me about the man in charge, a cold, calculating figure named Victor Orlov, who saw the snows of Montana as the perfect cover for his kingdom. I got Markham back to my cruiser under the cover of the deepening twilight. We were halfway down the mountain when Kodiak stiffened, a sharp bark erupting from his chest. I slammed on the brakes and looked where he was staring. Hovering just above the tree line was a small, black drone. It watched us for a moment, then zipped away into the gloom. My blood ran cold. The feeling of being violated was even worse when I got home. A black SUV, no plates, was pulling away from my driveway as I approached. Inside, the air felt disturbed. Nothing was broken, but I knew my small home had been searched. In my study, it was confirmed. My personal hard drive was gone, and the paper files I kept on local cases had been rifled through. They weren't looking for valuables. They were looking for what I knew. The fight was no longer about missing trucks. It was at my front door. I was outmatched and exposed. I needed help that a standard police force couldn't provide. I thought of the reclusive woman on the edge of town, a name I'd heard whispered among the few veterans in the area. Clara Vance, an ex-military signals expert who kept to herself. Her cabin was a fortress of antennas and analog equipment. Clara was lean, sharp, with wary eyes that sized me up instantly. I laid it all out. Orlov, the drone, the military-grade tactics. I saw a flicker of recognition in her eyes when I mentioned the communications jamming. "That's not cartel stuff," she said, her voice tight. "That's military e-warfare. I saw it used in Helmand, a frequency trap." Her past was speaking, a wound that had never healed. She agreed to help. Within an hour, she had a trace. "The source is mobile, but it's routing through a major hub," she said, pointing to a blinking dot on her screen. "An old freight depot, place called Snow Trail." The depot was a graveyard of skeletal warehouses. We moved through the ruins, Kodiak scouting ahead. Inside one of the sheds, we found a hatch leading to an underground shelter. The place was a smuggling arsenal, crates of biochemicals and military pharmaceuticals. As I scanned the room, my flashlight beam caught a glint of metal under a box. A landmine. "Stop!" I yelled, but Kodiak was already moving. Before I could process the click of the trigger, he slammed his body into my legs, knocking me backward. It wasn't an explosion of shrapnel, but a hissing cloud of yellow powder that erupted upwards. A chemical trap. Kodiak staggered, coughing, shaking his head as the aerosolized nerve agent did its work. I caught him before he fell, my heart hammering against my ribs. "Easy, buddy. I got you." Clara was already there, pulling a decon spray from her kit. His breathing was shallow and a raw burn was already forming on his paw, where he'd taken the brunt of the spray. He had saved my life. As I held him close, a shadow fell across the doorway. I spun around, weapon raised. A man stood there, his face lean and sharp under a ski cap. He looked familiar. "Still punching your way through problems, Hayes," he said, a grim smile on his face. He held up his hands, showing they were empty. "Agent Leo Chen, FBI. I've been under for 2 years. You just walked into the middle of my operation." He looked at my pale face, then at the panting dog at my feet. "You've made a mess, but you've also kicked the hornet's nest wide open. Orlov's moving product across 3 borders tonight. If you call in the cavalry now, he's gone. The ghosts scatter." He pulled a slip of paper from his pocket. "1 shot, Hayes. We get 1 shot to take down the whole kingdom. These are the coordinates for the main compound. Get your dog patched up. You, me, and your friend with the radio gear. We're going to end this tonight. We're going to end this tonight." Agent Chen's words hung in the frigid air, and then the night became a whirlwind of hushed coordination. Within 2 hours, a quiet, professional federal team, led by a stern-faced director named Grant Foster, materialized at a staging point miles from the compound. Clara, her face illuminated by the green glow of her screens, became our eyes and ears, patching into their encrypted network. The plan was simple and brutal. Foster's Bravo team would hit the South Slope. Leo Chen would lead a small entry team to secure the prisoners. My unit, Alpha, with Kodiak and me at the point, would breach the main fence line. Victor Orlov's fortress was a jagged scar on the mountainside, a cluster of shipping containers and scavenged steel lit by the cold industrial blue of humming generators. We moved like ghosts through the snow-dusted pines, the silence of the mountain our only cover. On Foster's mark, the silence shattered. A flashbang detonated on the western perimeter, its bloom of light followed by confused shouts. Power to half the compound died as Clara worked her magic. We breached the fence. As we moved across the yard, two guards rushed from a supply shed. Before I could even raise my rifle, Kodiak struck. He was a blur of black and rust, launching himself at the first man and driving him backward into a snowbank. I neutralized the second before he could radio for backup. We were moving fast, a coordinated wave of shadow and force, and then a sharp, clean crack echoed from high above. I dropped instantly, instinct taking over as the bullet sliced the air where my head had been a heartbeat ago. I rolled behind a stack of frozen pallets, my heart pounding. "Sniper! North Tower!" I hissed into my comms. "Copy, Evan. I'm on it." Clara's voice came back, strained. "Be advised, that's not just a lookout. The heat signature and firing rate. This is a professional." Another shot rang out, chipping a piece of concrete from the generator near my position. I was pinned. The sniper had me zeroed in. Beside me, Kodiak let out a low snarl, his body crouched, not in fear, but in coiled, furious energy. Then before I could give a command, before I could even think, he bolted. He broke left, a dark streak against the white snow, charging directly for the icy scaffold that ran up the side of the sniper's tower. "Kodiak, no! Wait!" But he didn't slow. He scaled the frozen metal stairs, his claws finding purchase where a man would have slipped. The sniper, his attention fixed on me, didn't hear him coming. From my position below, I saw the silhouette at the top of the tower lurch backward with a strangled scream. A rifle tumbled through the air, clattering uselessly onto the ground below. Then, silence. I scrambled to my feet and rushed for the stairs. When I reached the top platform, Kodiak was standing over the sniper's limp body. The man was unconscious, his jaw dislocated where Kodiak had struck him. My partner was panting, a trickle of blood dripping from a shallow graze on his flank. But he was standing. He was alive. I knelt beside him, my throat tight. "Good boy," I whispered, pulling his head to my chest. "You saved my life." He just leaned against me, a silent, profound acknowledgement passing between man and dog as the sounds of the successful raid rose up from the compound below. He just leaned against me, a silent, profound acknowledgement passing between man and dog as the sounds of the successful raid rose up from the compound below. My radio crackled, pulling me back to the fight. "Evan, this is Chen. We've cleared the main building, but Orlov's made a run for it. East side, through a maintenance tunnel." I gave Kodiak's flank a quick check. The wound was shallow, and we descended back into the chaos. We found the tunnel exit just as a figure cloaked in gray burst from the darkness. Viktor Orlov was no longer a calculating kingpin. He was a panicked animal, scrambling through the deep snow toward a hidden snowmobile. He hadn't counted on us. We cut off his escape route, and he skidded to a halt. It wasn't my gun that made him surrender. It was the sight of Kodiak, standing firm in his path, a low growl rumbling in his chest, his amber eyes burning with resolute purpose. The fight was over. By dawn, the mountain was crawling with federal agents. The cold blue lights of Orlov's fallen kingdom were replaced by the flashing red and white of official vehicles. A sharp professional agent named Isabel Rossi took my statement, her eyes occasionally drifting to Kodiak, who sat patiently at my side. "What you've done here, Officer Hayes," she said, flipping through a datapad filled with evidence, "is dismantle a domestic threat network. Smuggled weapons, biochemicals." He was even starting to traffic people. "You saved more lives than you know." Later, I saw them lead Markham Jennings to a medic. He was weak, but he walked on his own, and as he passed, he gripped my arm. "Tell your dog," he started, his voice thick with emotion. "Thank you." A week later, the fear that had held Silver Creek in its grip had finally thawed. The town gathered in the central square, not for a formal ceremony, but for something more genuine. Someone had sculpted a life-size German shepherd from snow. It was perfect, strong, proud, its ears perked as if listening for trouble. Children laid pine branches and the few winter flowers they could find at its feet. Kodiak stood beside his likeness, looking entirely confused until a little girl in pink mittens tentatively reached out a hand. He leaned forward and gently licked her fingers, and a wave of soft laughter and relieved tears rippled through the crowd. Clara was there, a real smile reaching her eyes for the first time since I'd met her. The school board asked me to start a tech club for the kids, she told me, a hint of wonder in her voice. Guess this old signal expert still has something to say. Later that evening, Director Foster called with a formal offer. A promotion, a desk job, a new life far away from the biting Montana winters. It was the kind of escape I once thought I wanted. I looked out the window of my small house, at the mountains sleeping under a blanket of fresh snow. I thought of the silence that was no longer a void, but a peaceful quiet. I appreciate the offer, Director, I said into the phone, but I think my place is here. The next morning, Kodiak and I were back in the cruiser, driving the northern route. The snow was falling again, soft and gentle this time. It wasn't hiding secrets anymore. It was just making the world clean. He rested his head on the center console, his amber eyes watching me with that same steady knowledge. He knew, just as I did. We weren't running from the ghosts of the past anymore. We had found our purpose not in forgetting, but in protecting. We had found our home, not in a place, but in a duty we shared. Two guardians of the quiet white world we had fought to reclaim. Beyond the thrilling pursuit of justice, the story of Officer Evan Hayes and his canine partner Kodiak offers us a profound and quiet truth about navigating the winters of our own lives. It reminds us that our past scars, the losses we carry, do not have to be burdens that weigh us down. Instead, like Evan's own history of grief, they can become the very source of our strength, empathy, and resolve. The story teaches that true healing isn't about erasing the past, but about integrating it into a present filled with purpose. This purpose, as we see so clearly, is often found in the simple, unwavering act of loyalty. Kodiak's silent companionship is a powerful testament to the fact that the most meaningful support doesn't always come from words, but from a steady presence, a trusted friend, a beloved family member, or a faithful pet who stands with us through the storm. This bond of responsibility gives us a reason to rise each morning, to face the cold, and to keep moving forward. It anchors us when we feel adrift. Ultimately, the story suggests that courage is not the absence of fear, but the choice to act in spite of it for something or someone you love. Evan's decision to remain in Silver Creek, to protect his small community rather than seek personal advancement, speaks to a deeper wisdom. It shows us that a life of great value is often built not on grand ambitions, but on the quiet, consistent duties of service and protection. It's a beautiful reminder that our greatest purpose can be found right where we are, in guarding the small patch of the world we call our own, with a loyal friend by our side.